clarifying question.
Just wanted to see what was
All right, we'll go over here.
Almost all the analysis was based on reduction of cost. Did you do an analysis of what it would take to just increase in order to keep the things that we value? We live in one of the best communities in the entire United States. If we can't fund our education, if we can't, what would it take? It looks like it's only dollars per household per month. You know, so have we done any analysis, what we would have to just raise to get to the level of spending to support the things that we hold for? Look at it the other way. You know, how do we raise
Yes,
money
yeah.
rather than cut the budget?
We're looking at, as we look at referendum discussions, the amount of money you can raise, based on impact on the household. We would like to increase our operating levy to raise an additional $14 to $15 million, and then we want to do those two things going as we always have. But that would obviously require approval by the voters.
But you're saying you got an $8 million gap, you know, what would it take to, you know, it looks like it's a few $100 per household per year to close that gap.
Right, and that's part of, we have a financial consultant, Ellers, that does the analysis of it. If you're looking at increasing a levy, what would that cost per home based on the value? So we're taking a look at that as well. And then projecting out, if the state stays where they are, we stay under inflation, trying to project that out as well. Because part of this wasn't just added in the last couple of years, it's been added a while ago, some of these programs that have come into place, and we've tried to hang on to these programs as long as we could before we got to this point. That's why it becomes such a large deficit as we went through. We could have looked at, because I've had questions, well, why didn't you reduce a little bit at a time? Which we could have done too, but we value all of these programs. None of these suggestions are good suggestions. They're not good for our kids. They're not good for the program that I think that we built, or the district that you say that we built. The support that we have is because of the programs that we have as well. So we've tried not to do that as long as we could, hoping that the state would start to fund the way they used to. If you've lived here a long time ago, you didn't see levies for a long time. It's just in the last 10 or so years where the state got into a little bit of financial difficulties and they started to ask the local communities to support education at a much different level than they used to. So then we get into the coming to you and asking you for more support, which is tough because it doesn't pit us against you, so to speak, but that's how it feels. Because we know that it's a big ask, so to speak. It's tough with taxes as high as they are. And then we keep getting behind the cost of living in the program. So yes, we're looking at that analysis too, on what we could go, or what that would mean for us and where would we go. And then we have to be careful as we go through because, as Dan showed you with the level of average funding and with the metro area districts that people index off of that might be at the cap, they certainly are at a different place to add programs. So a number of these programs, the community was asking us for, how come we don't have that? Can we add this in the district? So we tried to make sure we're competitive. We may not always be able to do that as we go through, but I think we have some very good things now in place that we can continue to build on. I know that's a long answer. That's the problem when I answer. We'll go here and then over there.
In looking at the cuts to the music and athletic departments, I'm seeing the cuts to the music department, and so far what I've heard is, what, a $10 increased activity fee for the sports participation? That doesn't seem equitable.
I can take that one. I'm Mike Johnson. I'm one of the assistant superintendents, and I work with the athletic directors on this. 5 to 6 years ago, each one of the high schools had taken a $40,000 reduction, and we discussed that as well as the BAC and the steering committee. But in talking with the ADs as well, that $10 increase in the activities would put us right about in the middle of the Suburban East Conference too. We didn't want to put way too much on our students and parents to do that. But once again, that was the recommendation.
Well, I'm more concerned that we may have a severely diminished music department within a few short years without the feed-in from the elementary school, but I'm also concerned that the savings being reflected in the budget aren't true savings, because if fewer kids are in the middle school and are going to be in mainstream classes as they go into high school, if the music department shrinks. Right now, the music department has very large classes. As the classes shrink, those students are going to be somewhere. They're going to be in an academic class, and if we don't want to exceed the whatever number of students per class that we're working on, and it seems to me that it's gonna be 6 of one and half a dozen of another. Either you have them in music education, or you're going to have people in academic classrooms. So I don't see the savings of teachers.
Well, because of the secondary scheduling especially, it's basically based on our students' needs and desires. And, with those electives, that's what they're able to take. If we still get full classes in the music, that's what we're going to offer. It's just raising that ratio by 1 across the board, 6-12. I'm sorry, K-12.
But I think the point is, by cutting that off, right now we have one band director that's instructing perhaps 80 students. And in a few years from now, if we lose the theater program and we lose the music program and the band program, we then have probably, 4 instructors probably required instead of 1. So we're not necessarily seeing that savings.
If that comes to fruition, you'd be exactly right. And so part of, as we looked at that, was, is there a way to offer the program in different ways? Because we do appreciate what the music program does for our kids and what happens in the district. But if that would happen, if there'd be no way to offer kids and get them excited early on, and they didn't get into the band program in high school, that could happen.
That's an impact that we would want to make sure that as we go through the rest of the evening, we'll come back to that kind of thinking and question. Sir.
Yeah, first of all, I'm very cognizant of how difficult it is to be in your position. That being said, this is completely unacceptable, all right? We have something to be very proud of, a great school system, we have some really great teachers, and as I look at just the numbers, the difference between the budget deficit by 2016 end is 4.2%, correct? And as I recall, you were indicating, I think Dan was indicating that the difference was 1.5% annually compounded, correct? Isn't that correct? You said the difference in the expected budgetary difference?
That's, I think,
Did I miss something on that?
The 1.5 is the one we have budgeted for the formula increase.
Right. Compounded over 2 years, that's 3.22%, not 4.2%.
I'm not sure what the 4.2.
Listen, so, okay, I'm getting to my point is that another way to look at it is what's the 3, 5, and 7 year district student growth rate that we've experienced? And what's the difference in expenditure that we've experienced? And I see a disconnect in holding those costs down. At the same time, I think, when was our last referendum? What, 2012? Or was it last one? 2013? Time flies.
6 months ago.
So, and obviously that's where you want to go. You want to go to another referendum.
Yeah.
I just think, what I do for a living is I help look at public companies improve their efficiency. And where I start, I think it's 83% is your labor, correct? Yeah. Where I start is looking at my largest costs. Now, your fuel costs, I don't know what they are. What are they, Dan? Do you know? Approximately?
For the buses?
Yeah.
Microphone.
Yeah, right.
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but our overall facilities costs are about $3.50 a square foot for all of our facility expenses.
Right.
That includes utilities and operating our facilities on a day-to-day basis. But I can't tell you off the top of my head what the total cost is for utilities.
Okay. Well, fuel costs should go down, correct? About 20 or 30% over the next 2 years?
I would be surprised if that was the case.
But we buy into a state buy,
Sure.
and so we're locked into whatever, is that a year, 2 year, whatever the state
First of all,
buys?
we're talking about transportation, are you talking
Yeah.
about,
All fuel costs.
Yeah.
one, we run primarily diesel, and not gasoline, so diesel prices have not come down
15%,
substantially, they're
right.
down about 10 to 12%. We don't know what the long-term prognosis is that, we also buy our fuel on contracts, so for this year, at least we're locked into a contract.
Wait, just to finish up though, we're hitting on some very small percentage cuts, rather than looking at some of the larger areas to take. And I think this is a mistake. I would hope that you have some very smart and intelligent people. It sounds like you're really reaching out and trying to go out for other expertise. But I would seriously look at larger areas for those cuts, rather than taking significant liability, safety, security, and things like that, and also probably also risking some loss of revenue, additional revenue, because what's going to happen? You know, there's alternatives to public education, and especially to where you go, where you take it.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and kind of touching on that with, you know, there's a strong potential for students to go, or parents to choose to enroll their kids in other, you know, private or different, you know,
Charters.
school programs if they don't feel that there's some other programming for the things that matter to the kids, such as music education. And just kind of looking at this agenda and seeing the explore the best instrumental music programs in the state and country and best practices regarding, you know, instrumentalists, to me, like, what does that mean? Like, you know, like, I don't know what to take away from that statement. I'm just kind of interested to see what the thought behind that was and what kind of the alternative to having music education in elementary schools is, what kids are supposed to do instead.
The question is, on the impact statements that were available, there's a statement about exploring other options for our elementary music programs. So that's the question.
Julie Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent. Really what we're taking a look at the elementary level is the delivery of band and orchestra. For those of you who are familiar and have had elementary children in band and orchestra, you know that they receive large group and lesson pull-out during core instruction time, which makes it extremely difficult when many of our bands and orchestras are upwards of 100 students. It really kind of clears out the entire classroom. So looking at a different delivery, we have a lead principal in the district who works with our music department and looking at options such as Wayzata and many other metro districts that start band or orchestra, mostly band. Many high schools do not have orchestra in the 6th grade, but looking at what other kind of delivery systems. What we realize in looking at that option is it will cost the district some new expense when students go into middle school. We know, I think it was at the couple set up there, that we would need additional teachers to help provide that service. But I think what we're looking at from the elementary perspective is not having students in and out of the classroom kind of all day long. We do have some students that are in band and orchestra, which means that they're out of the classrooms 2 times. We also have many students that receive pull-out special education services. We have about 130 of our students are also in special education. So we know then it kind of becomes a revolving door in what we consider to be that core instruction time. So it really comes down to looking at a different delivery model that can meet the needs of the students in the core academic areas as well as the arts and community areas.
Yes, let me mention something that hasn't been mentioned that I think it would be a very significant savings. You've got 21 plus schools. You've got approximately 3 million square feet. You've got 140 to 150 full and part-time custodial staff, more than likely doing what's called zone cleaning. By changing the system and the process that's being done to another process, you would save 10 to 30% with an average of about 20%. And most other districts were full-time custodial with wages and fringes. This is a pretty substantial number on an annualized basis. And not to mention the energy factor. It's a different process, and it's called team cleaning. And this is something that I've been involved in for 40 years, and I do consulting in this area, and this is basically all I do. And when I read the article in the Sunday paper, and I see what you have laid out here, I think this is excellent, but it's something you just might consider. And if you have any interest, I have some information on it you might consider looking at. But I think there's some serious numbers there.
We've got just a couple more questions, this gentleman. Yes.
Yeah, like others, understand this is just an impossible, difficult situation for the district and for you guys. It is what it is right now. It sounds like there's a plan for digging out and possibly levy increase. You've got a lot of room to increase on the operating levy, correct? But that doesn't do anybody any good right now, because that doesn't happen until next November. So there's this year of uncertainty, and I guess I would just wonder, do you really want to, I don't want to say devastate, but really take away some critical programs, and I'm talking about elementary, band, orchestra, world language in the elementary schools, reading specialists, so critical, all really important areas. Band, orchestra, world language in the elementary makes this district stand out among East Metro districts. Someone else mentioned parents have choices. They might make a choice over that. And you lose $10,000 per kid that moves out. So and again, I'm glad I'm not sitting where you're sitting, but you're increasing staffing by one, which is $1.5 million. If I'm a classroom teacher, I don't want to increase by more than one. I know what that is because I was a classroom teacher for 13 years and had 40 kids in a class the other day too. But to buy time, to find another way to do this, lots of retirements in a district this size, attrition kind of stuff that wouldn't take away these really great programs you have. Possible new funding by the state, a levy increase, and you have a chance at not taking these programs away, coming back, lowering the class size, and getting through the whole thing without these losses.
And that's one of the, when Dan mentioned the flexibility that the board gave us to look at the fund balance, we're trying to gather some input, take a look at what would be fiscally responsible on how far to drop in possibly doing something like that. In looking at because none of these reductions, we'd like to avoid making these reductions, but then there's a risk, so to speak, involved with what happens next year, but that's part of what we're trying to do as we gather all the input as well.
The gentleman here just mentioned it, and I heard it a couple times during your speech, but you talked a little bit about a lack of legislative financing and also some burdens that were being created by the legislature. Is there a strategy document that's been developed for us to engage in outreach with our legislators here in Minnesota so that we can go out to them and talk about some of these issues and some of the funding shortfalls with them on an educated basis?
We do have a legislative document that was brought to our school board legislative conversation that we had in January, early January. Right now it's on that board meeting's agenda, but I can certainly post it onto this hot topic so that you're aware of the different positions that the district has.
That would be great, thank
And
you.
truly, the main flexibility is if funding comes on the base formula for school districts, they have flexibility to work through it. If it comes categorically, it's great if it adds a program for kids, but it doesn't help with the overall piece. Last year, there was some categorical aid that came that was wonderful with all-day kindergarten for our parents, but that was a fee-based program for us, so it didn't end up helping as we took a look at that. So the flexibility comes from funding on the base.
All right, we'll go here.
I just have a quick question, because I know I attended several of the meetings on the long-range facility planning, and I know we're to, you know, bring in the people and the revenue that, because I'm hoping as other people, my concern, to be honest, is the elementary music and world language, that, you know, some of these seem like they could be a little bit more of kind of a stopgap until we get those enrollment numbers up again, and some of these seem like a much longer term program ending route. What the timeframe is for that?
With regard to our enrollment projections, one of the concerning things that is happening is that neither of our primary cities, Woodbury or Cottage Grove, are experiencing the growth that they had anticipated back in 2013 when we thought that the housing market was going to make some pretty dramatic improvements. They were projecting some significant numbers of additional houses. We are not seeing the growth at the rate that they have projected. Right now it's running probably about 65% of what their projections were. So we had projected over 10 years that we would see about 2,700 additional kids. If the patterns of growth stay as they have been for the last year or two, that's more likely to be closer to 1,000 to 1,500 kids, which is about the rate of growth that we've been experiencing over the last several years.
Last question, and then we'll.
I'm sorry, but could you go back to that slide, the first question requested? The things that have been added. There. Okay. I understand, I'm an educator myself, so I understand that we're a very staff-heavy organization, that 80 to 85% of our dollar goes into staff funding. So therefore, you're going to wear a lot of your budget cuts. Should you have to make cuts, you're going to wear that on the back of staff. I understand that. What I don't understand, as I look at what's up there, first of all, I don't understand why we're referencing that as something that is on the chopping block. Simply because it was kind of last hired, first fired type feel doesn't fit for me. But when I look at that, and Dan, you referred to a subset of those people. I don't remember the term you used. I need to tell you, it offended me. I don't remember what the term was, but I think you want to rethink that from a political standpoint. You're wearing that heavy on low-level kids and on music and world language. When you look at your top-notch kids, they're not on here at all. So what we're doing is streamlining and refining rather than offering a broad education. We're going to chop music off at the roots. We're going to chop world language off at the roots. But we're going to make sure that we feed Project Lead the Way, IB, AP. And I don't know that I understand that. My kids fit into both of those. And my kids are leaving, as a matter of fact. This is our last year. My baby graduates. But I guess I'd like to understand why you've made the choice to only chop certain things and to chop them deep. Could somebody respond to that?
That's a good question.
I'm just wondering on the committee as we went through, I mean, if you look at some of these, every program that you decide to reduce is going to have the same feeling. So it becomes programs against another program. So if you look at one program versus another, when you look at music, if you look at top students in general, if you say a lot of kids that are in music, because of what music does for you in your brain development, would fit into the categories. And I'm just using what you had said as we went through. So it wasn't looking at trying to take our most needy kids and take things away from them, because that wasn't the case. What's harder at the elementary is that you have programs versus the secondary, you just have electives that kids take. And so as you reduce the staffing, the electives, it's a student-driven schedule, so if kids don't sign up to classes, don't run. And so as we take a look at some of these, why the committee took a look at one or another, I don't have an answer to say that one was more important than the other, because again, as you start to, I think as I explain that, it feels like I'm saying music was expendable, and it wasn't. It was something that I believe, and I don't want to put words in the committee's mouth, as we look through that we could look for alternatives for kids to be involved in music. It's hard to have them involved in AP if they're not involved at the school. There isn't another alternative. So I think there was discussions like that as far as if you reduce, is there a way to still offer a program maybe in a different way? And if it comes through a different service such as community ed or something like that versus saying it's gone. And so that may have been the discussion. I want to be careful because, Dan, I'm not sure if you have more to offer from what the committee talked about there, but that was part of how could you replace some things if it wasn't present in the classroom or in the school?
Could I just follow up with that real quick? And this is a question specifically for you, Dr. Jacobus, though I understand that you don't make these decisions. Do you believe that if your first offering for a student in music is grade 7, that you're going to have a number of kids signing up in 7th grade?
Well, yeah, they have to. It's required. It's required to have. No, but you have to have. It's required in middle school for them to take band, orchestra, or choir.
Look, I think that, I don't know what that would be. I think kids' love of music may come at whatever age, but we would really, we think that program's important at elementary. That's why we added it. So honestly, I don't know that wouldn't happen. And that's a heartache about these decisions as you go through. I'd like to think that if this ends up where it is, and we don't have that program at the elementary, that if we could look for ways to get kids involved in music, that we could still have a flourishing music program at older. But I don't know that. But I wish we weren't doing any of this. And so I think those are they're hard decisions and not decisions that I feel good about.
How do we measure the value of these increases? Because being a music person, like you said, you start hitting program against program. But I would say that music program is more important than half the things on that.
So that's where we're gonna kind of shift into our next activity.
We're gonna go.
No.
We're gonna come around to small groups to talk to you.
World language was put in the elementary school when Spanish immersion came around. Why are we cutting the world language out of the elementary schools, but not cutting anything from Spanish immersion? That was put in, I remember, I came to the district in 2002. We did not have world language in the elementary schools at that time. When Spanish immersion came in and it was a choice program that you got in kindergarten by lottery, is when they put in the world language programs into the elementary schools. Why is that being cut, but Spanish immersion gets to stay? Why are we going to eliminate it out of the neighborhood schools and have a special interest school get to stay?
I would say this in regards to world language. I think many Minnesota districts started adopting world language in elementary, middle schools, and high schools, as did we. The difficulty that we're having is many of our elementary schools have adopted a world language. We've had buildings that have had to change, started with Mandarin and went to Spanish. And we're really at a point because we just don't have the candidates that we're not able to fill our world language positions. And this past year was the first year we were not able to find a qualified candidate for one of our positions. So right now at one of our elementary buildings, we do not have world language currently. We actually have a science specialist in there. So I think really when it comes to world language, it was about our inability at the elementary level to fill those positions.
How are we filling positions at Spanish immersion then?
Those classes.
So we're gonna shift into our next activity because we wanna make sure that we get everybody's voice to carry through. So I'm gonna do an activity and the teachers in the room kind of back me up on this one because we've got some people already standing